My siblings want to reconnect after they stole my inheritance and left me homeless 5 years ago. Now they're begging to talk because I control 51% of Dad's company and everything is about to explode. I hadn't heard my brothers, Eric and Mason, in almost 5 years. Not since the week our dad died, and everything in my life folded like a cheap lawn chair. Back then, I was working as a delivery driver in Phoenix, barely making rent, while they were already climbing the ladder at some tech sales firm. When the will was read, they convinced me Dad had left nothing but debts and a falling-apart auto parts business no one wanted. I believed them because they were family, and because grief makes you stupid. 2 months later, I was sleeping on my friend Caleb's couch. The house I grew up in was sold to cover expenses, or at least that's what Eric told me over the phone. I remember asking, "So there's really nothing for me?" And he sighed like I was being greedy. Mason jumped in, saying, "We're all hurting, Jake. Don't make this about money." I felt ashamed for even asking. Life moved on the way it does when you don't have options. I got a job fixing forklifts at a warehouse outside Tucson, learned to keep my head down, and stopped answering unknown numbers. Holidays came and went with zero texts from them. I told people I was an only child because it hurt less than explaining. Then last Tuesday, my phone started blowing up while I was on break. 3 missed calls from Eric, 2 from Mason, a message from Mason's wife, Laura, who had never spoken to me in her life. "Hey Jake, we really need to reconnect. Family is family." My stomach felt like I'd swallowed a battery. I called Caleb first. He laughed and said, "They either joined a cult or they need money." I joked back, but the truth is I felt sick. That night, Eric finally reached me. His voice was warm in a way I didn't recognize. "Little brother, it's been too long. We've all been talking and realized we handled things badly after Dad passed." I asked what changed. He dodged it, saying they wanted to meet for dinner. Maybe help me get back on my feet. That line made me stare at the cracked ceiling of my apartment. I've been on my feet for years without them. Yesterday, Mason called, pretending nothing had happened between us. He talked about his new house, his kid starting baseball, like we'd been chatting every week. Then he slipped and asked, "So how's the company treating you?" I nearly dropped the phone. I told him I didn't know what he meant. Long silence. Then he laughed too hard and said he must have mixed something up. That's when I drove to the county records office on my lunch break. The clerk, a bored woman named Denise, pulled a dusty file and gave me a look like she'd seen 100 family wars start at that counter. Inside was a contract I'd signed at 19 when Dad couldn't pay me for helping in the shop. Instead of wages, he gave me shares, 51% of the business once he was gone. The company they told me was worthless is now a regional supplier worth millions. I sat in my truck shaking while the desert heat cooked the steering wheel. All those years of scraping by, and they knew. They had to know. Last night, the group chat started. Eric wrote, "Jake, please answer. There's been a misunderstanding about the ownership paperwork." Mason added, "We can straighten this out like adults." Laura sent a voice note saying the family needs healing and that Dad would want unity. I haven't replied. I just keep rereading the contract with my name typed in bold letters, thinking about the couch, the eviction notice, the birthdays with no calls. My phone is ringing again as I'm recording this. It's Eric for the 4th time today, and the message preview says, "Don't do anything with the shares until we talk." I left my phone on the passenger seat while I stared at the desert beyond the windshield, the sun dipping low behind the mountains, throwing orange streaks across the horizon. The heat still lingered, baking the dashboard, but it didn't matter. Every vibration from my pocket made me flinch. Eric's name lit up again. 4th call today. 5th, if you count the one I missed while getting lunch. I finally picked up, letting it ring twice before I answered. "Eric," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. My stomach had been tied in knots for hours, and now it felt like someone was pulling at the ends. "Jake, thank God you answered," he said immediately. There was that fake warmth again, the one I hated but couldn't quite place. I think we need to talk about this, face to face." I laughed bitterly. "Face to face? After 5 years? You mean after you lied, stole everything, and left me to sleep on a friend's couch?" Eric paused, and I could hear the slight hesitation in his tone. "Jake, that's not how it was, at least, not how he meant it. We were trying to protect you, in a way." "Protect me?" "By taking the house, the inheritance, and pretending I didn't exist." My hands were gripping the wheel so hard my knuckles turned white. "You're calling this protecting me? Look, I know it sounds bad now, but you weren't supposed to find out like this." I froze. "Find out like what?" About the company, he said slowly. The shares. I felt my heart skip. He already knew. He had to. They'd been watching somehow. They hadn't called me in 5 years because of grief. They'd called because they were worried about losing their chance. I pressed harder. How much did you know? Eric sighed, and I swear I could hear a million excuses trapped behind it. Enough to know that. Well, you have control. But I swear, Jake, we didn't mean to. I cut him off. Stop. I parked at the edge of an empty lot just outside the city. The wind kicked up dust, swirling in little orange clouds around my tires. Just stop lying. Don't pretend this is about family now. Because it's not. It's about the money, and I know it. You knew about the shares all along. Eric went quiet for a few seconds, longer than felt natural. Okay, fine. Yes, we knew. But it's complicated. Mason and I, we thought the company was still worthless. Dad's paperwork was messy. We didn't think it meant anything. I laughed out loud, a short, harsh sound. You didn't think it meant anything? You stole everything from me because of a piece of paper that said I get nothing? And now it's suddenly complicated. Eric's voice dropped, almost pleading. Jake, please. We didn't want to fight. We just, look, can we meet? Just to talk. No lawyers, nothing. We can make it right. I looked out over the dusty landscape, squinting at the horizon. The sky was turning that deep purple that makes everything else look fake, like a filter someone applied and forgot to take off. And the truth hit me in a cold rush. They weren't coming back for family. They were coming back for control. I told him, I'll think about it. And I hung up. But it didn't stop there. Mason called within 10 minutes, and his message was different from Eric's, more casual, like nothing had happened. Hey, Jake. I know this is awkward, but we need to clear the air. Can we have dinner? Just us, old times. I really want to explain. I didn't answer. Instead, I texted Caleb, who had been quiet while I was freaking out all day. Caleb, they're calling again. They know. All of them. And I feel like a damn fool for even thinking they care about me. He replied almost immediately. Jake, man, they're circling. I've seen this kind before. They're about to try everything. Don't give them an inch. I leaned back in my seat, letting the cold vinyl push against my spine. Caleb was right. I couldn't let them in, not yet. But a part of me, the part that still believed in family even when it hurt me, wanted to see if there was even a shred of honesty in their words. The next day, I got an email from Laura, Mason's wife. I don't know why she was included now, but she sent something that looked like a peace offering. Jake, please. We want to work this out. We know things went wrong. We all want Dad's legacy to be something that unites us. Can we meet somewhere neutral? Just talk. I stared at it. Neutral. As if a neutral place could erase 5 years of betrayal. I ignored it. Later that night, Eric texted me, something simple, almost casual. Jake, the company files are messy, but there's a way to split things that works for everyone. Let's not make this harder than it needs to be. I felt bile rise in my throat. Everyone. They mean them, not Dad or me. I called Mason instead. His tone was calmer than Eric's, slower, more deliberate. Jake, I know you're angry. You have every right. But please, we need to understand each other before you do anything rash. I can't explain everything over text. Then explain it now, I snapped. What did you take? What did you know? And don't sugarcoat it. Mason hesitated, and then I heard it. The truth buried under years of spin. We knew the contract gave you control. But Eric, he said he'd manage things. Said he could protect the company from falling apart. I trusted him. We all did. And when things got messy, I didn't know how to fix it without leaving you out. I was shaking now, my hands trembling on the steering wheel. So you left me homeless because you didn't know how to fix it? Are you kidding me? No, Mason said quietly. We were scared. Dad died, and we didn't know what to do. And when we saw the shares, we panicked. We thought the company might collapse if we didn't control it. I swear, Jake, it was fear, not malice. Fear, not malice. I laughed again, but it wasn't funny. I remembered sleeping on Caleb's couch, the eviction notice shoved under the door, my phone blowing up with calls from unknown numbers about bills I couldn't pay. Fear, not malice, huh? I didn't know whether to cry or scream. Instead, I did the only thing I could think of. I started digging. I spent the next 3 days pulling every document I could find. Corporate filings, old emails between Dad and Eric, invoices, contracts, shareholder agreements. Every little thing that could paint the truth. And I discovered something I didn't expect. Eric had quietly transferred company assets, quietly changed supplier agreements, and even started negotiating with a couple of regional investors, all while pretending to Mason and me that everything was messy paperwork. He wasn't protecting anything. He was profiting. And Mason, bless him, had been dragged along, trying to clean up a mess he didn't fully understand. I sent Mason a text. We need to meet. Now. I can't trust Eric, and I think he's been hiding more than you know. He replied almost instantly. I know. Let's meet tomorrow morning at the diner near my office. 9 a.m. I'll tell you everything. I didn't sleep that night. I sat at my kitchen table, staring at my laptop and the pile of paperwork spread across it, trying to make sense of everything. The numbers, the emails, the dates, they all told the same story. Eric had been planning this, quietly, calculatingly, while Mason had been just trying not to break the company entirely. When I got to the diner the next morning, Mason was already there, nursing a black coffee and looking worse than I remembered. His hair was messy, his tie crooked, and there was this tired slump to his shoulders. He looked human, vulnerable, scared, but also guilty. Jake, he said softly when I sat down. I'm glad you came. Cut to it, Mason. No sugarcoating. He nodded, took a deep breath, and started talking. He walked me through the months after Dad died, how Eric had taken control of certain accounts, how he'd hidden revenue reports, and how Mason had quietly tried to patch things up so the company didn't collapse. The more he spoke, the more I understood why Eric sounded so confident on the phone. He'd already mapped out his path to regain the shares, and I was the only obstacle. And you're telling me you didn't know Eric was hiding anything? I asked. I didn't, Jake. I swear. I thought he was trying to stabilize things. I didn't realize he was redirecting money, changing contracts, and yeah, manipulating you out completely. It made sense. Mason had been scared, yes, but Eric had been playing chess while I was off the board. Before I could respond, my phone buzzed. Another call. Eric. I let it ring, watching Mason's face. He flinched when he saw the caller ID. He's calling again? Mason asked quietly. Yes, I said. I could feel the weight in my chest. And this time, I don't think it's to apologize. Mason looked down at his coffee. Jake, whatever you do, just be careful. He's not the brother you remember. I didn't know what to say. I wanted to yell, to slam my fists on the table, to tell them both exactly how much pain those 5 years had cost me. But I didn't. I took a breath, closed my eyes, and thought about the shares, the house, the inheritance, and everything I had lost. Eric was circling. Mason was trying to help, but he couldn't stop what was coming. And for the first time in 5 years, I realized this wasn't about forgiveness or family or even money. This was about survival. When I left the diner, Mason walked me to my truck. Jake, we'll get through this. I promise. But Eric, he's not playing fair. Not even a little. I know, I said, starting the engine. The desert stretched ahead, empty and silent except for the faint hum of traffic in the distance. And I'm ready for whatever comes next. My phone buzzed again. Another text. Eric, as expected. Jake, please. Let's not rush. I think we can work this out. Call me. I looked at it, my fingers hovering over the screen. I wanted to reply. I wanted to tell him off, to threaten him, to ignore him, to do 100 things at once. But instead, I just turned the truck onto the highway and drove, thinking about Mason's words, about Eric's lies, and about the pile of paperwork waiting for me at my apartment. Everything was building, and I could feel it, like a storm over the desert, quiet now, but deadly and unstoppable. I don't know how much longer I can wait before the next move, but I promise the final update is coming soon. Final update. Everything came out, and I finally saw them for what they are. After driving that morning, I spent the rest of the day holed up in my apartment, staring at the mountain of files I had collected over the last week. I'd laid them all out on the kitchen table: contracts, old invoices, emails from Dad, corporate filings, shareholder agreements, even some bank statements I'd pulled online. I felt like a detective who had stumbled onto a crime scene, except the crime scene was my own family. Mason had promised to meet me again that evening. He texted around 4. I'm at my office. Come when you're ready. Let's settle this. I wanted to be calm. I wanted to act rationally. But I was anything but. My hands shook as I packed the files into a backpack. I checked my phone. No calls from Eric yet. That made me tense too. Silence from him was worse than his constant ringing. It meant he was planning. I drove to Mason's office in near silence, the desert sunset washing everything in burnt orange and purple. When I arrived, Mason was waiting by the door, looking tense. He nodded at me, and we walked inside. His office was small but orderly, the kind of place where people spent too much time at a desk and tried to convince themselves that organization meant control. I placed my backpack on the floor and sat down, and he followed. "I'm glad you came," Mason said softly. His eyes were tired, with that guilt still etched into the lines around them. "Let's cut the niceties," I said. "I want the truth, everything. No sugarcoating. And don't tell me you didn't know what Eric was doing, because the evidence says otherwise." Mason nodded slowly. "I'll tell you everything I know. But be prepared. It's messy. Try me," I said, crossing my arms. He leaned back and took a deep breath. After Dad died, Eric immediately started taking control. He rewrote some contracts with suppliers, started funneling some of the money into side accounts, claiming it was for operational costs. I didn't know the full extent at first. I thought he was trying to keep the company alive. I even defended some of his decisions when you weren't there, thinking it was better than letting everything collapse. "So you covered for him while he stole from me," I said flatly. "No, not intentionally," he said quickly. "I didn't know he was manipulating invoices and hiding profits from you. Honestly, I thought he was just keeping things stable while I figured out what to do. And when I realized some of it wasn't right, I tried to fix it quietly without involving you. I was scared, Jake. Scared of losing the company, scared of Eric's temper, scared of what would happen if I told you the truth." I laughed bitterly, feeling the heat rise in my chest. "You were scared. You left me homeless because you were scared. That's what this comes down to. Fear. Not love. Not loyalty. Fear." Mason flinched but didn't deny it. "I made mistakes. Big ones. But I never wanted to hurt you. You have to believe that." "I don't know if I do," I said, rubbing my face. "Because Eric doesn't give a damn about any of us except himself." That's when my phone buzzed. "Eric. Again." I ignored it. Mason noticed. "He's calling," Mason said quietly. "I see that," I said. "And I'm not answering. Not until I know exactly what he wants." We spent the next hour going through the files. Mason explained which accounts had been manipulated, which contracts Eric had changed, and which supplier agreements he'd secretly renegotiated. The more we dug, the more I realized how much Eric had lied and how well he'd covered his tracks. He'd made the company look like it was struggling, like the shares were worthless, all while positioning himself to regain control. "Why didn't you stop him?" I asked. "When did you realize he was playing us?" Mason hesitated. "I realized after the first year. By then, he'd already rewritten most of the contracts. And I didn't know how to fight him without making things worse. I thought if I kept things stable, you'd eventually get back what was yours. I didn't know it would take this long." "You mean you thought I'd sit around waiting for a miracle?" I said, voice rising. "Do you know what it was like, Mason? Sleeping on Caleb's couch. Watching my life get taken from me while you two acted like everything was fine. Do you know what it's like to be invisible to your own family?" Mason's shoulders slumped. "I'm sorry, Jake. I really am." I didn't say anything. Instead, I pulled out the file with Eric's account transfers. "Here's the proof of everything," I said. "Look at this. The hidden accounts, the revenue Eric rerouted. He's been lying this whole time. And he's still trying to manipulate me." Mason leaned forward, reading over my shoulder. His face went pale. "Jake, he's planning to push this further. If you confront him without a lawyer, he could try to make you look like you're the one at fault. He's clever, Jake. Really clever." "I know," I said. I felt cold, calculated rage settle in my chest. "That's why I'm going to do this carefully. And that starts with facing him directly, once and for all." We agreed on a plan. Mason would help me document everything and prepare an audit of the company's books to prove my ownership. We'd confront Eric together, with full evidence, so there could be no spin, no lies. That evening, I drove to Eric's house. I hadn't been inside in years, and honestly, I almost didn't want to go. But this had to happen. I parked a few blocks away, watching the lights of the house flicker on as the sun set. I could see him moving around through the blinds, probably rehearsing the same lies he'd been telling for months. I took a deep breath and walked to the door. Mason was already there, waiting. "Ready?" he asked quietly. "Let's end this," I said. We walked in together. Eric was waiting in the living room, a smug grin on his face, like he'd been expecting me. "Jake," he said, voice smooth, almost casual. "Glad you came. I think we can work this out." I set the files on the coffee table, letting them slide in front of him. "Work this out," I said. "Eric, We both know you've been lying for 5 years. You've manipulated contracts, hidden revenue, and tried to make me homeless. And now you're sitting here pretending this is about family." Eric's smile faltered for a split second, just long enough for me to see the fear behind it. "Jake, you don't understand. I did what I had to do to protect the company." "Protect it for you, Eric," I said. "Not Dad. Not me. You." I slammed my hand on the table. "Do you have any idea what it's like to have your life ripped out from under you by your own family?" Mason spoke up. "Eric, enough. He's right. You've been lying, and it stops here. Show him the accounts, show him the contracts, or don't show him anything at all." Eric's grin returned, but it was tighter now, less confident. "You think you have all the proof? Let's see it then." I handed him the documents. He flipped through them, his face twitching. Okay, fine. Some of this isn't what it looks like. I was trying to stabilize things. Make sure nothing collapsed before Jake, before we all figured it out." I shook my head. "Don't lie to me. You didn't stabilize anything. You diverted money, renegotiated contracts in secret, and made yourself look like the savior while leaving me out completely. Do you know what that makes you?" Eric looked at me for a long time. "A businessman trying to survive," he said finally, voice low. "No," I said firmly. "It makes you a liar and a thief. And now, everyone's going to know it." Mason pulled out his phone and showed Eric an email chain he had saved. Proof of Eric's side deals with suppliers and investors, all backdated and manipulated. Eric's eyes went wide. He realized there was no spinning this. This isn't fair," Eric said, his voice shaking now. "Fair?" I echoed. "You stole from me for years. Fair went out the window when you left me on the streets." Eric sat back on the couch, staring at the floor. For the first time, I saw him shrink. Not just angry, not just defensive, but small, beaten by his own lies. Mason spoke next. "Eric, you need to step back. I'll help clean up your mess legally, but Jake owns the majority shares. That's not going to change." Eric said nothing. He just looked at the floor, muttering something about Dad wouldn't want this, but even that sounded hollow. I turned to Mason. "I can't trust him, but you tried. I see that now. But trust doesn't undo the past." He nodded quietly. "I know. I just wanted to help." I left Eric's house that night feeling exhausted but strangely calm. The confrontation was over. Eric couldn't deny the truth, and the company was finally mine. Mason and I still had a lot of work ahead, but at least I knew who was on my side. Over the next few weeks, Eric tried a few small maneuvers. Emails, phone calls, even sending Laura to mediate. I refused to engage. The evidence was clear, the accounts audited, and my ownership legal. Mason stayed by my side, helping me navigate the aftermath. Slowly, the company started running as it should, and I could finally make the decisions I'd been denied for years. Eric faced serious consequences. He was removed from his position and forced to repay funds he had misappropriated. The law didn't see him as a criminal, not technically, but he lost everything he'd schemed to gain. He moved out of town quietly, no fanfare, no dramatic farewell, just gone. Mason stayed, of course, but only as a consultant, helping repair relationships with clients and suppliers. Our bond was fragile but real now, grounded in honesty rather than fear or guilt. We still had arguments, but at least they were normal ones. And me? I finally felt like myself again. The house was still in my name, the company under my control, and the ghosts of the past were finally laid out where I could see them, analyze them, and move forward. It wasn't perfect. Nothing about this was perfect. But for the first time in years, I felt like I wasn't running, hiding, or being manipulated. I was in charge. I was heard. And I had the family I chose. Mason and a few true friends who never abandoned me, by my side. Everything had been revealed, and now I could finally breathe.